There I was, standing at the very edge of my own field in evergreen acres, bathed in the soft glow of twilight, when I witnessed an astonishing sight: Serena's opulent $220,000 wedding tent, billowing gracefully in the gentle evening breeze like a majestic pavilion from a bygone era. The resounding bass of the booming music vibrated through the cool air, each note resonating with the promise of a dramatic spectacle, while the sharp, staccato click of stilettos punctuated the ambient melody. Amidst this cacophony of modern indulgence, my well-tended soybean sprouts bore silent witness to the audacity of extravagance. Elegant guests, draped in fine attire and exuding an air of careless entitlement, paraded across my land, a land steeped in tradition and nurtured with hard work. Each step a reminder that modernity often encroaches on the sanctity of nature. Then, in a moment that felt almost surreal, the caterer's voice cut through the din, brazenly inquiring if my tractor could be moved, as if it were a mere accessory disturbing the aesthetic perfection of the event. A wry smile crept across my face, blending amusement with a mounting sense of defiance. With deliberate calm, I reached out and flipped the switch. In an instant, the manure spreaders roared to life, a thunderous, unexpected chorus that shattered the quiet of the countryside. The sound was a vibrant, mechanical declaration, a living embodiment of nature's retort to modern entitlement. It was as if the very machinery had been waiting for this moment to awaken, to remind all present that beneath the veneer of extravagance lay a realm governed by time-honored principles and the enduring spirit of the earth. The interplay of light, sound, and the gentle sway of that grand tent set the stage for what was to become a battle between the unyielding soul of evergreen acres and the fleeting arrogance of modern ostentation. Let's rewind 3 months back, to a time when I still believed that common decency prevailed, that even the most peculiarly obsessive or scooter-bound neighbor would at least ask permission before borrowing a bit of your electricity. I had only just moved into my cherished corner of quiet suburban heaven, nestled in the charming enclave of Mapleview Grove. The lot was perfect, a generous patch of earth, a cozy backyard, and neighbors whose smiles, though few, were genuine. Even the single outdoor outlet, positioned just beside the walkway I adored for draping Christmas lights and charging my trusty bike, seemed to promise a peaceful coexistence. I was not a particularly outgoing person. I preferred the comforting solitude of my carefully curated haven. Yet, I made a point to greet my neighbors with a courteous wave, diligently shovel my sidewalks, and even tolerated the HOA's meticulous 6-page rule book detailing everything from mailbox hues to trash invisibility. Back then, I naively trusted that community respect was mutual, a belief that would soon be put to the test. Every day felt as if it were unfolding in gentle harmony until the first subtle signs of encroachment began to appear. Little did I know that the calm of Mapleview Grove was merely the eye of an impending storm, one that would challenge not only my patience, but also the very boundaries of my cherished home. In the gentle rhythm of daily life, the disturbance arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. One day, as I strolled by my perfectly trimmed hedge, I noticed a scooter parked unassumingly on the sidewalk. Its charger, like a lazy vine, lay draped casually against the lush greenery. I assumed it was a neighbor simply taking a moment to top up their battery, a minor, easily overlooked act in the grand tapestry of suburban routine. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the presence of that scooter became a recurring motif. Always there, always plugged in, as if silently claiming a right to the outlet on my wall. Each time, I found myself pausing, my heart momentarily tugged between polite curiosity and the stirrings of indignation. I watched as the cord, once thoughtfully coiled away, reappear with an almost deliberate regularity, draw attention to the fact that someone had decided to use my property without consent. This subtle invasion was not a matter of grand theft, but of daily entitlement, a quiet, relentless breach of boundaries. The very act, repeated over time, began to erode the tranquil harmony of Mapleview Grove. I documented each instance meticulously, noting the time, the date, and the silent defiance in that recurring scene. It was in these seemingly inconsequential moments that the seed of discontent was sown, heralding the beginning of a conflict that would soon erupt into something far more dramatic. Not yet ready to launch into overt confrontation, I bided my time, until one morning, as the soft mist of dawn caressed my front lawn, I discovered an act of blatant disrespect. My sprinklers, meticulously set on a timer to deliver a gentle, life-sustaining mist to keep my lawn vibrant, had been tampered with. I stepped outside to find my hedge, once a proud sentinel of order, now unevenly carved, as if a rogue scooter had rammed right through it. The once pristine blades of grass were trampled and rutted, and one sprinkler head lay snapped off on the ground, a silent, yet damning testament to sabotage. My heart pounded with a mix of disbelief and simmering anger. This was no isolated incident of electricity theft. It was a deliberate, calculated attack on my property. Every detail, the disheveled hedge, the broken sprinkler, the unmistakable traces of mud and leaves clinging to the intruding scooter, spoke volumes about the recklessness of the offender. I couldn't ignore the symbolism. The very element meant to nurture and sustain my home had been weaponized against it. In that defining moment, I understood that the subtle intrusions had escalated into an act of vandalism, forcing me to acknowledge that a line had been crossed, a line that demanded more than mere observation. That very evening, as the sting of repeated trespasses still echoed in my mind, I knew decisive action was necessary. I reached out to my trusted friend, Vince, a licensed electrician and my personal go-to for all things fixable without turning my home into a full-blown Home Depot disaster. Over a shared cup of strong coffee and deliberate conversation, I laid out the string of misadventures: the unauthorized scooter, the ruined sprinkler, and the daily erosion of my peaceful domain. Half expecting a simple, conventional solution, like securing the outlet with a lock cover, Vince instead flashed a knowing grin and asked, "Do you want legal or do you want poetic?" Intrigued, I replied, "Why not both?" And so, with an air of creative defiance, we set about transforming the nuisance into an opportunity for innovative justice. Vince meticulously rerouted my outdoor circuit through a dedicated breaker, ensuring that every element of the setup remained entirely legal. Then he installed a state-of-the-art smart plug equipped with usage tracking and a built-in kill switch, along with a subtle wiring tweak that was as clever as it was effective. The ingenious trap was simple yet formidable. Whenever that persistent scooter attempted to draw power, the circuit would momentarily surge, tripping only its own connection while leaving my home supply untouched. As the system came to life, I watched with a blend of solemn satisfaction and a spark of poetic amusement. The silent sentinel was in place, ready to enforce my boundaries with the quiet authority of well-engineered circuitry. In that moment, I realized that combining legal precision with a dash of creative retribution was not just a practical solution. It was a masterstroke that turned the tables on entitlement, setting the stage for the next act of suburban justice. The trap was set, and the first act of retribution unfolded with startling precision. I sat inside my home, savoring a quiet cup of coffee as I monitored the live feed from the smart plug camera on my phone. Then it happened. The familiar hum of the circuit signaled activity. Within 10 seconds, Karen's persistent scooter rolled into view and, with the habitual plug inserted, initiated the moment of truth. Almost imperceptibly at first, a soft, mechanical surge rippled through the outlet. An elegant surge, calibrated to trigger only her connection. In a mere 30 seconds, the circuit detected the overload. Her house, one by one, was plunged into darkness. I could see it in real time, the sudden flicker of a porch light, the interior glow vanishing as if someone had quietly flipped a switch on her entire world. Outside, Karen's reaction was immediate and chaotic. I watched her, arms flailing in confusion, as she stepped out onto her porch, her face contorted into a mix of shock and indignation. It was as if she were being attacked by invisible forces, her attempts to unplug and plug in again only deepening her perplexity. The air was charged with both irony and poetic justice. The very power she had taken for granted was now her undoing, all orchestrated by a carefully engineered system that left no visible trace of tampering. Every moment of that incident resonated like the opening note of a grand symphony, a powerful statement that boundaries, once crossed, demand their due in swift, electrifying fashion. The next crescendo of this unfolding drama came at the HOA meeting, a gathering that promised little more than polite nods and orderly discourse, yet transformed into a battleground of public accountability. The meeting room was filled with residents whose faces held a mixture of curiosity and concern, their eyes flickering between me and Karen as the tension mounted. Karen, armed with a meticulously arranged binder and a rehearsed monologue of grievances, stood as if on a theatrical stage. With each carefully measured word, she attempted to weave a narrative of hardship, blending claims of disability, misplaced entitlement, and community service, while downplaying the blatant misuse of my private outlet. Her tone, both saccharine and defensive, filled the room with an air of forced empathy, yet it was punctuated by an underlying note of arrogance. I, on the other hand, remained calm and resolute. With deliberate precision, I presented the irrefutable evidence stored on a thumb drive, crisp footage from the smart plug camera, detailed electrical logs, and even the certified report from Vince that explained the legal modifications. Every piece of data was a silent rebuke to Karen's flamboyant claims. The room, once buzzing with murmurs, fell into a heavy silence as the undeniable truth was laid bare for all to see. The HOA president, a figure whose reputation for impartiality commanded respect, surveyed the evidence with a measured gaze. In that charged moment, it became clear that Karen's narrative, no matter how theatrically delivered, could not override the facts. With calm finality, the president declared that no resident had the right to exploit another's property, and that Karen had, unequivocally, overstepped every boundary. The verdict was as sharp as it was just. Karen was banned from using any external outlet not registered to her property, and formal sanctions would follow for the repeated trespasses. The meeting concluded with a palpable sense of relief and vindication. For many, it was a long-awaited rebalancing of power, a clear message that the community would no longer tolerate the undermining of personal property and the abuse of communal trust. The room's atmosphere shifted, as if a heavy burden had been lifted, replacing tension with a newfound unity and respect for boundaries. Just when I thought the battle had reached its climax, the situation escalated into a spectacle that would redefine suburban warfare. One afternoon, as I returned home, I was greeted by an audacious sight: a massive white tent, pitched across the very back edge of my field. It wasn't an innocent addition. It was a bold, uninvited intrusion, orchestrated by Karen herself. The tent, intended for a rustic chic wedding celebration, had been set up without so much as a courtesy call. Metal stakes were driven into my soil, and folding chairs were dragged to the carefully cultivated soybeans. Each marked a stark violation of my property's sanctity. Inside, the caterer nonchalantly approached me, inquiring if I could relocate my prized tractor because it clashed with their envisioned aesthetic. I felt a deep, simmering resolve building within me. This was no longer just about petty power, theft, and tampered sprinklers. It was a direct assault on my land and my heritage. With a calm that belied the storm raging in my heart, I excused myself to the shed. There, I prepared for my ultimate retaliation. That very next morning, as a string quartet began tuning in the background, a surreal counterpoint to the unfolding chaos, I flipped the switch once more. This time, both manure spreaders surged to life in perfect unison, their powerful engines unleashing a torrent of water and debris along the field's edge. The result was a dramatic, calculated deluge that washed over the tent's perimeter, erasing its audacious imprint from my land. Karen, in a sequined dress and with her unmistakable air of entitlement, stormed over, yelling about permits, sanitation, and ruined aesthetics. I simply pointed to the demarcation line that divided my property from hers, a clear, immutable boundary, and reminded her that what lay beyond that line was solely mine. By sundown, the tent was gone, its remnants cleared away, and with it, Karen's farcical attempt to rewrite the rules of engagement. This was not a mere act of defiance. It was a resounding statement. The message was clear. When you trespass on sacred ground, you invite consequences as swift and unyielding as the circuits I've so carefully orchestrated. The ultimate retaliation wasn't about petty revenge. It was a declaration of respect for tradition, property rights, and the enduring spirit of evergreen acres. In the aftermath of the tent calamity, the tides turned decisively in my favor. The relentless documentation, the footage, the logs, and every meticulous record Vince helped me gather had evolved into an unassailable dossier. I compiled everything into a comprehensive digital file that chronicled each act of intrusion, each instance of unauthorized power theft, and every deliberate act of property damage. Armed with this evidence, I set out to expose Karen's web of deceit to the entire community. I shared the data in neighborhood forums and handed copies to local media, ensuring that every resident in Evergreen Acres knew the full extent of her misdeeds. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Neighbors, once passive observers, began sharing their own stories of similar grievances, stories of petty thefts, unwarranted fines, and unexplained outages. What started as isolated incidents now painted a clear picture of systemic abuse. The public outcry reached a crescendo. Local community leaders and even the once skeptical HOA board could no longer ignore the mounting evidence. Karen's carefully crafted narrative of victimhood unraveled under the weight of undeniable proof. The community, united by a shared sense of injustice, demanded accountability. With every retelling of the evidence, Karen's authority crumbled, and the facade she'd maintained for so long was laid bare for all to see. This final countdown was not just about personal vindication. It was a collective reclaiming of our neighborhood's integrity. The truth had been set free, and with it came a renewed commitment to the values of respect, transparency, and mutual accountability in Evergreen Acres. In the wake of the public reckoning, as the echoes of Karen's deceptions faded into memory, a profound transformation began to sweep through Evergreen Acres. The fallout from her relentless abuse of power and entitlement had united our community in unexpected ways. Neighbors who had once exchanged mere polite nods now gathered to share their grievances, their hopes, and, most importantly, their plans to restore the true spirit of our neighborhood. In a final act of resolute reclamation, the HOA board, now steered by President Ellen, enacted new bylaws ensuring that all personal outdoor outlets would be clearly marked, secured, and strictly off-limits to unauthorized use. Karen's reign of petty sabotage was officially over, and she was formally removed from any position of authority. Her attempt at turning victim and manipulating public sentiment were met with a calm, measured response. The truth had been set free, and accountability was not a matter of opinion, but of documented fact. As the dust settled, I organized a modest community cookout, just burgers, a bit of music, and heartfelt conversations among neighbors who had learned to stand together. In that warm, laughter-filled gathering, we celebrated not only the return of our individual rights, but also the collective strength that comes from unity. The glow of my porch light, steady and uninterrupted, became a symbol of resilience and new beginnings. No longer were we divided by petty disputes or overshadowed by a single domineering presence. Instead, we embrace a renewed commitment to respect, collaboration, and genuine care for one another. In that moment, I realized that restoring harmony wasn't about grand gestures or epic battles. It was about the everyday acts of standing one's ground and choosing to build a community where every boundary is honored and every voice matters. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but as I looked around at the smiling faces and heard the murmurs of shared contentment, I knew that Evergreen Acres was entering a new chapter, one defined by unity, justice, and a lasting sense of home.